You are watching In Conversation This Week with Miceal O'Hurley.
Mr. Ambassador, you were received by President Higgins at the Aras on Uttaran in, I think, 2017. You've been here a few years. Share with me, if you will, the impressions you've had of Ireland during your time here.
Well, okay, it certainly takes more than 3 years to really get into the feeling of the country, but it's, again, certainly enough to make some conclusions which are basically positive, and I really appreciate the Irish people, both professionally in terms of my contacts with the Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as generally the public people with whom I meet in just the everyday life. All of them are open, hospitable, and it's certainly true that that resembles the way Russians behave themselves, well, naturally predisposed to the open dialogue, to discussing things. So in this regard, I find it comfortable here. I really find even the weather comfortable sometimes, not all the time. So overall, it has been a positive period in my life.
Mr. Ambassador, diplomacy has always been built on personal relationships. Because of the pandemic, we've had a curtailing of face-to-face meetings. How have you found conducting diplomacy during the pandemic and keeping in contact with your friends and colleagues in the diplomatic community?
Well, it's certainly true that the current way of life under the COVID regulations, it changes many things. We now are in the Zoom formats, and that certainly gives us a chance to continue business, but it has its own downside, of course, because you really lack the live dialogue feeling, and this is important well, for every human relationship and for the diplomatic dialogue as well. But we maintain this kind of connection, and I hope that we will not forget how to talk to each other in person when it's all over.
When it comes to bilateral relations, tell me about the state of affairs between Russia and Ireland today.
Well, I think over the years, the Russian-Irish relationship has been developing in a positive, constructive way. We have a good rapport, and I do believe that both sides treat each other with respect. We respect positions and views of each other, and it helps. It really lays a good foundation for mature relationship. We maintain very useful political dialogue. I would just recall that last year in July, Minister for Foreign Affairs Koveny visited Moscow and had a good discussion with Minister Lavrov on a number of international and bilateral issues. We have an ongoing process of consultations between our foreign ministries, and it never stopped despite the circumstances of pandemic. What is really important that our parliaments have established a link. We have groups of friendship both in the Dáil and in the parliament, in the State Duma. We have had exchanges of visits, and we are currently exploring a way to continue that under these particular circumstances. Our trade and investment relationship has been strong. We're certainly satisfied that under under difficult economic conditions, we managed to hold the trade volume. Well, it certainly decreased, but not much. Not much. It's still around $1 billion. The cultural and humanitarian connection between Ireland and Russia is strong and quite prominent, and it continues. We have plans for the next year. So overall things are good, and I'm pretty sure that when the pandemic is over, we will be in a position to pick up on all the things on the agenda we are developing and to move forward.
Your Excellency, I know it's an EU topic, but it comes up often. So let me ask, what is Russia's view of Brexit?
Look, it's really a major topic here in Ireland. It's certainly less so in Russia, but still, we are not very far from the problem itself. Decision on the withdrawal from the European Union was certainly the one that British people and British government has taken. We share the view of the Irish government that the whole process of Brexit should not create problems for others, be it the European Union or Ireland, which is at the forefront here with this setup. The United Kingdom has been a major trading partner for Russia, and well, whatever it takes to move Britain from European Union, it certainly has some bearing on the trade relationship Britain has with its partners, and we don't want problems here. We certainly want stability in Europe, and we don't want Brexit create, some kind of distortion in the already established trade links. We certainly are in favor of the integrity of the Belfast peace agreement, which still is a major document which ensures peaceful development of Northern Ireland and, generally speaking, the normal life in the whole island of Ireland. So basically we are on the same wavelength with the Irish partners. We sympathize with them and look forward to really sensible resolution of all issues arising from the Brexit.
Let's talk about a hot conflict right now, Mr. Ambassador. Russia has enjoyed a historically close relationship with both Azerbaijan and Armenia. The two were engaged in a conflict over the disputed territories of Ngorno-Karabakh. Tell me, what is the status of the peace negotiations and the ceasefire Russia recently negotiated?
The Nagorno-Karabakh problem has been really a very hot and acute issue, not only for Armenia and Azerbaijan as two parts of the conflict, but for Russia and for international community as a whole. It is complicated. It is an ancient problem dealing with territorial claims, the lives of Armenian community in Azerbaijan. So it certainly took a whole lot of efforts within the Minsk group, which comprised of the OSCE, with the participation of Russia, France, and the United States. But let's look at where we stand now. I think that we have all reasons to say that there have been a breakthrough in this regard, especially in the current stage of the war, which really upset the normal life of Azerbaijanis and Armenians for what it is since September. On November 10th, leaders of Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan signed a joint statement which effectually stopped the war. The agreement, the statement, has frozen status quo on the ground as it was at the moment of November the 10th. The ceasefire is in place, the separation of forces is in place, and there are general outlines of territorial distribution contained in this formula. The main thing is that Russian peacekeeping contingent is being deployed to the front lines in Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as the corridor which connects Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, to ensure that there will be stability, no breaches of ceasefire, and the situation would be in reality favorable for the future settlement of all outstanding issues. That is a major thing, and I have to express my hope that it could lead to the settlement of the whole problem in the interests of both Azerbaijani and Armenian people.
And now, a brief word from one of our patrons.
I've been working in Louis Copeland's for over 20 years now, and anybody who knows me knows I'm very particular about the way I dress. I think a made-to-measure suit gives somebody a real signature style. You get to truly express who you are. Fit is everything. The beauty with a made-to-measure suit is there's no compromise. You get exactly the fit and the look that you want. I think a man needs to think of a suit in pieces rather than as a single suit, so they can wear the blazer with a pair of jeans, or wearing the trousers separately with a nice piece of knitwear. This way you get the maximum use out of the suit. What makes Louis Copeland really stand out when it comes to made to measure is our 80 years of experience and great tailors. We put a huge amount of effort into training up our tailors. They go to one-to-one training sessions, they have to actually sit a test, and this allows them to deliver the perfect suit. The key components of any great suit are a combination of fabric, cut and craftsmanship. When you get these three things right, that's when you get a really brilliant looking suit. When it comes to fabrics, we've got a great selection from the top Italian mills. The lining is a great opportunity to express yourself, to put something a little bit colourful or different on the inside. You can do this through colour or through pattern. The process takes roughly 6 weeks. Once we have your suit made, you come in for a final fitting. This is just to make sure that everything is perfect. Yuriy Filatov's been in business since 1933. Service is in our history. Made to measure is in our DNA.
And now, back to our interview.
In 2020, NATO claims that Russia increased the number of flights of the Tupolev 142 off Irish coast. These are maritime reconnaissance aircraft equipped for anti-submarine warfare. Mr. Ambassador, why is Russia increasing the number of anti-submarine warfare flights and maritime reconnaissance flights off of Irish coasts?
It is true that Russian Air Force routinely carried training missions in the region of North Atlantic. These flights take place in the international airspace according to all international rules and standards. The aircraft at no point enter the sovereign airspace of Ireland, nor there is any plan to do it. I don't think there is any surge or escalation here. Our military aircraft has been flying these missions for many decades. And it has nothing to do with Ireland. It has never been a problem for anyone except maybe for some British political and military leaders who have been exploiting this issue for their own purposes to create a myth of Russian threat throughout pretty much much of the modern history. There is no reason or intent on the part of Russia to provoke Ireland. We, as I told you, enjoy positive and respectful relationship, which is advancing steadily in many areas, and we see clear potential for doing that in the future. The issue of air travel safety has always been the priority for Russia, both in civilian and military aviation. The missions I'm talking about are no exception. They have been carried out in strict accordance with the ICAO rules and regulations and pose no threat to civil aviation.
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk about Ukraine. The EU and UN, including Ireland, have sanctioned Russia after the illegal occupation and attempted annexation of Donbas and Crimea. There are more than 13,000 Ukrainians dead and 1.5 million internally displaced people in Ukraine at present. According to Human Rights Watch, the EU, and the Crimean Tatar Resource Center, Russia is illegally conscripting Ukrainians into military service in the occupied lands. It's been 6 years since the conflict started. There's the Minsk agreement and now the Normandy negotiations. What do you see as the outcome of the negotiations in the Normandy format, and do you see a peaceful resolution on the horizon?
My overall assessment of the status of efforts to reach peaceful settlement of the conflict in the Ukraine region of Donbas is not extremely positive. To the contrary, it seems like we are moving to the wrong direction. And it is quite clearly the intention of Ukrainian government at this time, to move away from the only legitimate instrument which is in place, which envisages sensible, thought through way of settling the conflict. And I'm talking about Minsk agreements, which have been reached several years ago by the so-called Normandy 4, Russia, France, Germany and Ukraine. The Minsk agreements have been codified in the international law by the corresponding UN Security Council resolution. And we have been united in our view with France and German partners that it's the only way to advance the whole thing towards the peaceful end. This coming December 9 will mark a year since leaders of the Normandy Four met in Paris to discuss ways to advance implementation of the Minsk package of measures. I have to state that only 2 of maybe 7 specific steps which leaders agreed upon have been implemented over the recent years. First, we have seen that Kiev authorities and Donbas authorities were able to agree upon the exchange of prisoners and detainees. That's a plus. The other thing is that the contact group, which operates under the umbrella of Normandy format between Kiev and Donbas authorities, approved measures to enhance the ceasefire. They entered into force in July this year. That included ban on offensive actions, reconnaissance and sabotage operations, the use of any type of aircraft, the use any type of fire, retaliatory or sniper, establishing direct interaction in case of violation of the ceasefire. In general, these agreements are respected, albeit not entirely, but still. The remaining 5 decisions of the Paris summit have not been implemented, with clearly Ukraine being responsible for that. What I have in mind, the Kiev government still evades reaching an agreement with Donbas on all legal aspects of the special status of the region. Secondly, the Steinmeier formula, which is called by the name of the former foreign minister of Germany, which provides that the law on the special status of Donbas enters into force on the day of local elections, has not been incorporated into the Ukrainian law. Due to the Kiev's opposition, it is still not possible to agree on the new areas of separation of forces and assets along the contact line. Next, demining sites remain to be agreed, although the coordinates of 19 sites are on the negotiating table. Next, no new checkpoints have been opened on the contact line near settlements of Shastye and Zolotoye in Lugansk region. At first, Kiev delayed providing security assurances for construction works, and now it is delaying the works themselves. All in all, right now it is November 2020, and we see efforts by the Zelensky government to try to move things away from the Minsk agreement in general. They say, okay, we don't like what we see there. We would like to sort of change the sequence of measures and steps which are fixed in the agreement, and that's the way we like it. Well, I mean, you certainly can argue that way, but it's certainly no way to reach a settlement with the side. By that I mean the Donbas and Lugansk authorities. You have to compromise, you have to look for a dialogue, and that's the main problem. The Kyiv government is not prone to the direct dialogue with Donbas. They still believe themselves into the myth they've been trying to impose on everybody else, that it is Russia-occupied territory, and we just don't think we are able to talk to the people there. It's a mistake. There are no Russian troops involved there. The people themselves, the people themselves there, they simply took to arms after their own government in Kyiv launched a major military operation to suppress them in 2014. So you have to be realistic. You have to look into the root of the matter, which is the real unique character of Donbas, with the majority of Russian-speaking population, which really opposed any effort to impose Ukrainian language upon them as the only one accepted everywhere, including schools, etc. And they didn't have in mind any major armed conflict until the decision by the Kyiv authorities to subdue them with the force of arms. So we have to be very careful, we have to be patient, but it certainly takes some political will on the part of the Ukrainian government to move things along. At this time, they are very their intent to push for the next Normandy summit. Well, I wonder what would be the agenda there to discuss for leaders. The only possible agenda is to discuss the implementation of something they have agreed in Paris. I don't think such a summit makes sense at this moment. It makes sense only after the full implementation of the Paris agreements, and I'm pretty sure Berlin and Paris agree with that as well. Well, look, for years now, the issue of Crimea has been one of the most distorted, misinterpreted, and misused by the Western political class, and unfortunately by the media. The whole myth about annexation of Crimea has been created, and I believe it has been created on purpose. The main objective seems to be to cover up political blunder of the US and some Western European leaders in dealing in general with the Ukrainian problems. The attempt to punish Russia somehow for the decision of Crimean people to move back to Russia looks with every year looks like Alice in the Wonderland story. The fact is that referendum of 2014 in Crimea was absolutely a legitimate exercise by the Crimean people of their right to vote. The referendum has been organized by the government of Crimea, and Legislative Assembly of Crimea, with huge, overwhelming popular support. There have been thousands of volunteers who assisted in establishing polling stations, in looking after the public order in these places, in counting, etc. Results are pretty much telling for themselves. 96% of the voters declared their intention to make Crimea autonomous, independent, and to ask to be reunited with Russia. What is more even important is that the whole process was peaceful. I think it was more like festivity in the overall Crimea. What are the reasons? Well, the reasons, it seems like twofold. First of all, the majority, overall majority of Crimean population simply did not accept what happened in February of 2014 in Kiev, which is an armed overthrow of the legitimate government of President Yanukovych by a group of extremely nationalist and anti-Russian activists with a certain agenda to impose their views on every region of Ukraine, including Crimea. Well, they simply, the Crimeans did not want that and decided to take their destiny in their hands. That is quite clear. You have to keep in mind the historical background as well, because Crimea has always been part of Russia, except for well, historically brief period of time, which started in 1954 by General Secretary Khrushchev with, some Ukrainian mentality, perhaps, who just decided to move Crimean region from the Russian Federative Soviet Republic to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic within the Soviet Union. Well, at that time, it didn't matter much, although many people in Crimea resented that. It didn't go well with some people in Kiev as well, but really it was of not real importance, because borders, administrative borders within the Soviet Union, well, really didn't matter much. And that changed in 1991 with the breakup of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the newly independent Ukraine. And at that time, there had been the first attempt to make a decision at the referendum by Crimean population what to do next. And they overwhelmingly voted for independence from Ukraine. There was a second referendum in 1993 with the same result. Both were ignored by the politicians in Kiev and Moscow at that time, unfortunately. And all these years, this sentiment really, it didn't have anything negative to do with the Ukrainians. It was simply the intention to redeem this historical era and to get back to where they belong. So they did it in 2014, and I'm pretty sure that it was really historical fact, event, which will be recorded as a manifestation of democratic rights of Crimeans.
Mr. Ambassador, in the last 2 months, Alexei Navalny, a Putin critic and opposition leader, says he was poisoned in Russia. He was eventually flown to Germany, where doctors at the charity hospital say they found traces of the Soviet-era poison Novichok in his system. What do you have to say to critics who say that he's just another in a long line of critics and opponents of the Kremlin who end up poisoned or killed?
Okay, the Navalny case, you know, the whole story of Navalny seems to be a rather murky affair. I would like to take exception to the statement that Charité doctors can prove that Navalny has been deliberately poisoned. It was not them who made this claim first. That was made by the German military laboratory, where the samples of Navalny has been sent. Let's look at the timeline briefly to see what we can really see in this particular incident. It was back in August, I believe, when the whole thing began with Navalny feeling sick on the aircraft. It was immediately returned to Omsk, and the doctors at the Omsk hospital, and I don't have any reason to doubt their integrity, they did not trace any sign of poisoning in his blood samples, urine samples, and otherwise in the body. They still have biological material to prove that. No, they basically saved his life, and then upon the insistence of the family, they cleared him for transportation to Germany, being in close contact with German medics. All that fuss about poisoning started after Navalny was enrolled into Charité clinic, and the clinic itself passed the buck to Bundeswehr laboratory. One interesting thing, the clearance for transport of Navalny to Germany was made despite the fact that he is under criminal investigation in Russia. There is a case pending against him which involves a ban on his foreign travel altogether. So there have been a specific exemption to make everything possible to alleviate any concern on the part of the family. We have been in close touch with the German authorities, I mean the law enforcement and the Office of Procurator General of Russia. They made about a dozen requests to German colleagues asking for materials of the case to be passed back to them, so that we could compare data from Omsk to data from German laboratory to initiate criminal investigation if there is a certain degree of doubt about the medical condition of the patient. But we have not received any particular answer to that. More than that, the other question is the role of the Organization on Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Upon the instigation of several countries, Germany in the first place, they made a report which they did not want to share with Russia as well. And the question is why. Then they made report public, deleting all data on the chemical formula, which is in the essence, in the heart of the claim that he's been poisoned. Why? Now, this is another question. So there are many questions we would like to see answered in this affair. And we are still waiting for real normal cooperation, not as an act of good wishes from the German side. They have their own obligations under conventions on legal assistance in Europe and several other international documents. Up until then, we have to be really skeptical about the claims of Navalny's poisoning, let alone of any involvement of Russian state in this affair. It's just plainly unacceptable, and we will not accept that. We will go to the bottom, to the heart of this affair, and we'll see what we will see in the end.
Mr. Ambassador, as you know, there's a trial going on right now in the District Court in The Hague about MH17, a civilian airliner which was downed by a missile over Ukraine with the loss of 298 souls aboard. Tell me about Russia's view on the indictment and the trial, and will Russia be participating?
The fate of flight MH17 over Ukraine has been at the forefront of the public scrutiny for some time already. There is a huge degree of presumption of Russia's guilt somehow in this affair, basically going down to the claim that it was Russian missile which brought down the aircraft over Ukrainian territory. Well, we certainly reject this kind of claim, and our rejection is solidly based on the evidence, on all experiments undertook by the company which produced the missiles, and on a very basic fact that essentially it was physically impossible for any Russian military unit to effectuate this kind of action. The reason is that the missile parts which have been found on at the wreckage of the plane, they have markings, serial numbers, etc., which makes it possible to identify that the missile Book M was of specification which has long been deleted from the inventory of the Russian armed forces. The reason is that this particular missile, it's a solid fuel rocket, it has its sort of normal lifespan. Towards the end of it, the fuel becomes unstable and dangerous. And according to our regulations, it has to be the missiles have to be liquidated. And this particular series of missiles have been deleted from the arsenal in 2011, some 3 or more years before the whole incident of MH17. We simply did not have this missile anymore in the military units. So, I mean, we can go as long as we can around the issue, but the heart of the matter is that there was not physical probability for Russia to do the whole thing. There was not a single political motive to do that. As far as the procedure at The Hague with the district court continuing with the case, well, we have a reservation about the integrity of the court and really a valid assumption or presumption of Russian guilt in this affair. Despite that obvious state of things, we have been ready to cooperate, and we've done so, and we will do so if we feel that our certain rights are respected.
Mr. Ambassador, as you know, Ireland will be taking a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in the new year. Have you reached out to Ireland in this interim period? And how do you see Russia and Ireland cooperating on the UN Security Council in the future?
Well, we, as a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, we welcome Irish participation in the work of the Council. Irish approach to the international relations and to the UN agenda is valuable. We think it's a wise one to listen, think out of the box, and that could make a sound contribution to the work of the UN Security Council. We are in touch with the Department of Foreign Affairs of Ireland. We are discussing agenda which we have before us at the Council. The Council itself, it's a unique mechanism of international relations. There is nothing like that in any other direction of modern international life. So we have to be very careful about how we go about business there. It's really unrealistic to expect that everybody would agree on everything there. That's not the purpose of the Council. The purpose is to look for a compromise, well thought through compromise, to discuss things thoroughly and arrive at the decisions which would contribute to the international peace and security. And I believe that Ireland could really be a good and valuable partner in that endeavor. We look forward to cooperating with Irish partners there for the next 2 years. I think that we have many things in common in our attitude to the international problems. We share the same view on the significance of the United Nations per se. We think that there are a number of issues at the plank of international stability and security, disarmament and arms control issues, regional issues, namely Middle East. So it looks promising, and I'm really looking forward to working with Irish friends.
In the 1980s, Aeroflot kept a hub at Shannon Airport. Given all that's gone on with airlines and the COVID-19 pandemic, can you see a situation in which a Russian airline operates a hub in Ireland again?
You're quite right about Aeroflot having had a sort of a hub at the Shannon airport during 80s. Well, I would suggest that since then lots of water has passed under the bridge and many things have changed. Certainly we now exercise transatlantic flights directly from Moscow to New York. In this particular respect, the significance of Shannon Airport has diminished. But Aeroflot has been flying to islands since then, and recently we have established the direct flight from Moscow to Dublin. It has been quite successful. Well, unfortunately, for obvious reasons, they had to sort of put this on hold. But I am really hopeful that things would gradually change in terms of pandemic, because we are gaining experience, we are gaining advantages in terms of vaccine being developed. We will certainly hope for things in the air connectivity getting better. And hopefully by sometime next year, we would look forward to resuming these direct flights.
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk about bilateral trade if we can. One of Russia's wealthiest women, Yelena Baturina, bought the Morrison Hotel in Dublin, and if it sells at the asking price of near 85 million, it will represent a sizable return on investment. Likewise, the Kerry Group, an Irish business, has invested in Russia with a processing plant outside of Moscow. It gives it access to markets all the way from Belarus to Kazakhstan. How would you characterize the state of Russian-Irish trade relations, and what do you see on the horizon?
Well, certainly the Irish-Russian trade has been among the victims of this COVID pandemic. It's really slowed down economic activity. Another factor has been low petroleum prices, a decrease in demand in Russia for imported products, etc. But still, we are doing fairly well even under these circumstances. According to our data, over the first 7 months of this year, the value of trade has decreased only by 2.5% to the level of 1 billion euros compared to the same period in 2019. I think it's a good volume, good level under the circumstances. The main point, though, is it has an potential to expand. We are quite sure that we can go beyond the traditional range of products like oil, fertilizers, feed and lumber. Now we can go into other areas, which are building materials, seafood, flour, plastics, electrical equipment. We have good opportunities in the high-tech and technology sector. We also know that Ireland is a world-leading aviation leasing hub. Yes, it's like every other business, it's experiencing problems, but we are optimists. We look forward, and we hope that leasing operators will be interested in the new Russian mid-range aircraft MS-21. And the serial production of this new narrow-body aircraft is planned to start next year. we also welcome Irish investment in Russia, and we know that there are quite successful stories. There are, for example, Kerry Group, Smurfit Kappa, CRH, and Kingspan. They all do quite well in doing business in Russia. At the same time, we have lots of Russian business active in Ireland. Let me just point out the Rusal company, aluminum company, which operates the Europe's largest alumina refinery in Guinness. The GTLK Europe VTB leasing company here in Dublin, the Kaspersky Security Solutions Ireland, which is a major software company in the world, and some others. So all in all, things are not that bad, and we hope we can do it better next year.
One of the highlights of every year, Mr. Ambassador, is the annual Festival of Russian Culture, which takes place in Dublin. It was curtailed this year because of the COVID-19 crisis, but do you see a return to it after the crisis subsides? And what other cultural activities do you think might happen in the future?
The Russian festival has been for some time now a good part of the Dublin cultural life. It just gives an opportunity for Dubliners and guests of Irish capital to get themselves acquainted with Russian culture, engage with the Russian community here in Ireland. We think that certainly the current conditions of pandemic and restrictions, they quite clearly prevent organizers, the Russian community, to make it this year as it has been always, the number of concerts, movie screening, etc. But it has been moved online, and on the website of this event, in the Facebook, you will find a video of concerts by Irish musicians playing Russian classical music, documentaries about Russia, Russian films, cartoons in English, and I invite everybody to join in and visit this site, which is russianfestival.ie.
We've had some technical difficulties with Ireland's notoriously bad broadband. I appreciate you sticking with us. My compliments to your third secretary, Victoria, who kept the program running. It took a lot more of your time. I didn't get to ask all my questions, so I hope we'll see each other again, but I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Okay, Miceal. I think we've covered many things, and it's been quite extensive conversation. Thank you very much for your attention to the Russian issues, and I certainly wish that your viewers would find something, at least something useful and informative in our conversation. Thank you.
I'm your host, Miceal O'Hurley. Our special guest this week was His Excellency Mr. Yuriy Filatov, the Ambassador of the Russian Federation to Ireland. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll tune in for future episodes.